Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. You ever get a text so absurd, so cleanly vicious, it doesn't even hurt at first? It just makes your heart stop. Not from shock, but from clarity? That was me. Thursday morning, 8:12 a.m. A message from my wife, Erin. I'm not coming back. I've met someone much younger. No punctuation. Just that cold, precise detachment, like she was canceling a dentist appointment, not a 12-year marriage. She was supposed to be on a girls' trip in Palm Springs. Spa days, cocktails, some harmless escape from routine. That's what she called it. But she wasn't coming back. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at those words like they were in a foreign language. And then, another text. I've transferred our savings to my account. It's only fair. That one hit different. That one was surgical. And yet, I smiled. Because this wasn't a surprise. Not really. See, you don't just wake up one day and decide to disappear. You plan. You test the waters. You shift. And if you're quiet, if you're paying attention, you can feel when someone starts packing in their mind long before they touch a suitcase. Erin had been gone for months. Maybe longer. The way she stopped laughing at my jokes. How she'd flinch at my touch like affection was a tax. Always exhausted. Always stressed. Always somewhere else mentally. And lately, physically too. So no, I wasn't blindsided. I had already moved our real money 2 weeks ago. The account she wiped? It was a decoy. She thought she won. Thought she left me gasping. All she did was flip a switch. I finally replied. Good luck. That was it. No rage. No, how could you? Just a time-stamped signal that I was done pretending. And that night, I slept better than I had in months. Because the real story didn't start with her leaving. It started with how I responded. The next morning, I changed the locks. Not because I thought she'd come back, but because I knew, eventually, she'd try. Her name disappeared from the utilities. Her login to the security system? Gone. I made 3 calls that day, to my lawyer, to my financial advisor, and to my realtor. Erin didn't leave a man. She left a strategy. And now, she was on the outside of a house that was no longer hers, staring into a life that would move forward without her. She just didn't know it yet. But she would. Because when she checked that account balance the next day, it was empty, just like the space she left behind. And that was only the beginning. She must have opened the banking app first thing in the morning. I can almost picture it, still in some overpriced hotel bed, sunlight cutting through the curtains, reaching for her phone with that smug little smirk she always wore when she thought she'd won. And then, silence. No frantic calls. No angry texts. Just radio silence. Because that account? It was empty. Down to the cent. She probably refreshed the app 5 times. Checked the routing numbers. Thought it was a glitch. But it wasn't. I'd been preparing for this for months. Quietly. Strategically. See, Erin always believed I was predictable. Stable. Boring, even. The guy who'd take care of things while she found herself. I made it easy for her to underestimate me. But while she was checking out of our life, I was checking the temperature of the water and planning my exit. That savings account she cleaned out? I had started redirecting my salary to a private account weeks ago. I left just enough in the joint one to make it look convincing. Like a trap, baited and set. She bit. Hard. And now she was on a trip with no return ticket, no access to money, and no idea that the man she thought she left behind wasn't waiting around. He was erasing her. That same morning, I walked through our house with a trash bag. Not in anger. Just calm. Focused. Methodical. The framed photos? Gone. The drawer with her love notes from years ago? Empty. Her favorite coffee mug that I always washed by hand because she liked it just so? In the trash. It wasn't about revenge. It was about space. Creating it. Owning it. Reclaiming every inch of the home she abandoned in spirit long before she left in body. By noon, I'd been to the DMV to update the vehicle registration, her name off the title. I stopped by the bank to remove her as a cosigner. Changed every password I ever shared. Canceled the streaming services under my name that she used more than I did. Piece by piece, she vanished. And she didn't even know it yet. By sunset, I was sitting on the patio with a beer in hand, watching the last sliver of daylight disappear over the horizon. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I felt clean. like stepping out of a cold shower after months of fog. And then my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. I didn't answer, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because, for the first time in a long time, I didn't know her anything. Let her sit in that silence. Let her wonder. Because the real punishment wasn't losing me. It was realizing I had already let go, long before she ever hit send. She called 3 times that night. The first was at 6:47 p.m., then 6:52, then again at 7:04. Each call shorter than the last, like she was losing confidence with every unanswered ring. I watched the screen light up, watched her name pulse like some desperate heartbeat, but I didn't move, didn't flinch. Instead, I poured myself another drink and went back to clearing out the hallway closet. The one with her old scarves, the winter boots she never wore, the umbrella she swore had sentimental value but hadn't touched in 3 years. Gone. She didn't realize yet. When she left, she didn't pause our story. She ended it. And I wasn't going to be the man who sat by the window waiting for someone who walked out with a smile on her face and someone younger in her bed. I went to the gym that night. First time in months. Not because I needed a revenge body. That wasn't the point. I needed to feel alive in a way that didn't depend on her approval. I needed to sweat out every ounce of the man who used to beg for scraps of affection. The man who waited for her to come home emotionally, long after she'd checked out physically. I got home past 10. There were 4 new texts. The first was casual. Can we talk? The second tried humor. You changed the locks? Really? The third, colder. I need access to the account. I'm stranded. And the fourth, the one that said everything. This isn't funny. But I wasn't laughing. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because there was no point saying it anymore. Let the silence answer. Let her sit with it. She thought this was a game. A dramatic pause. A romantic reset. But she hadn't seen the look on her own face when she sent that first text. The one where she chose someone else. Younger, newer, more exciting. She hadn't seen the way she smiled when she wrote, "I'm not coming back." But I had. And that look? That little smirk of superiority? It never leaves your head. So no, Aaron, I'm not opening that door again. Because that door isn't even there anymore. You burned it. You walked through the ashes with your head held high. But now you're realizing what's on the other side wasn't freedom. It was exile. And the worst part? You did it to yourself. So ring all you want. I'm not home. Not for you. Not anymore. It happened on a Sunday. Late afternoon. Sky turning orange. Air crisp. The kind of quiet that feels heavy before something breaks. I was halfway through organizing the garage when I heard it. 3 knocks. Not the angry kind. Not desperate either. Just hollow. I already knew who it was. She had driven 6 hours back from her girls' trip, and now she was here. At the house she walked away from with a single text. Same girl. Different tone. I didn't move. From inside the garage, I could see her shadow shift behind the frosted glass of the front door. She knocked again, then rang the bell. Once, then twice, then silence. I wiped my hands on a towel, took my time. Then I walked up the steps, slow and steady, and stood just beyond the door, close enough to hear her breathing. She tried the handle. Locked. She called out my name, soft at first, then louder, then silence again. I leaned against the wall and waited. Let her sit in it. Let her feel what it's like when your presence no longer demands access. A minute passed, then 2. Then her voice, sharp now, frustrated. She said we needed to talk, that things had gotten confused, that she didn't mean for it to go like this. I smiled, because now she was negotiating with wood and metal. And the thing about doors? They don't care how sorry you are. I walked back into the garage and hit the button on the wall. Slowly, the door rolled down behind me, cutting off the last sliver of her silhouette. And that was it. I didn't shout. Didn't leave a note. Didn't even glance out the window to see how long she stayed. Because when someone discards you like an old receipt, you don't welcome them back like it's a rain delay. You build new walls. You reinforce the structure. And then you change the locks on your life, permanently. That night, she sent a message. I didn't expect you to shut me out. I didn't reply. Let her expect. Expectations were always her weapon of choice. Expect me to forgive. Expect me to wait. Expect me to bend. But not anymore. I went to sleep early that night. Slept like a man who had finally figured out what peace costs and was willing to pay every cent outside, she could sit with her decisions. Inside, I had everything I needed, and not a single part of it was her. People underestimate how loud silence can be, especially when they're used to controlling the narrative. By Monday, Erin had stopped texting me directly. Instead, the messages came sideways. Through friends. Through family. It started with a call from her cousin, Megan. She opened with small talk, asked how I was holding up, then casually slipped in, "She's really sorry, you know." She didn't think it would go this far. I let her talk, let her fill the silence with carefully chosen phrases. But I didn't give her anything to work with. No emotion, no story, just a calm, flat, "I appreciate your concern." That was enough. Because people like Erin, they rely on noise, drama, reaction. If they can't get in through the front door, they start poking windows. She thought dragging other people into the fallout would get a rise out of me. Thought mutual connections would pressure me into hearing her out. But I'd already seen that play before. The sudden vulnerability. I just need closure performance. And I wasn't buying a second ticket. So I started sealing the cracks. I unfollowed, unfriended, disconnected every social tie we still had. Mutual friends on Facebook? Gone. Shared playlists? Deleted. Cloud storage? Cleared. This wasn't pettiness. This was control. Of my space. My peace. By Tuesday, her sister messaged me. Said Erin had made a mistake. That she was confused and overwhelmed. That she was finally realizing what she'd lost. I didn't respond. Let the message sit there like a voicemail no one checks. Because clarity? It doesn't show up late. It doesn't knock when it's convenient. Clarity comes when you're alone in the consequences you created. That night, I sat on the back deck, grilled a steak, poured a drink, and watched the sun disappear behind the fence line. I didn't think about her. I didn't wonder where she was. I thought about how quiet the house had become, and how good that quiet felt when it wasn't a symptom of distance, but a declaration of independence. The next morning, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "She's at her mom's. She's not doing well." I blocked it, because her well-being stopped being my job the moment she hit send on that message. She picked a direction, and now she was starting to realize that the road didn't loop back. There was no detour, no return lane, and every mile she tried to crawl back across, I was already 10 further. Not out of spite, out of survival, because sometimes the only way to win is to disappear so quietly they don't even know they've lost until the silence is all they have left. Thursday night, 9:03 p.m. I was in the kitchen, rinsing off a glass, when the phone lit up. Unknown number. I let it ring. 30 seconds later, a voicemail came through. No text, no follow-up, just that red icon sitting there, glowing like some last ember she was hoping would still catch fire. I didn't press play. I stared at the screen for a moment, then swiped it away. Because by now, I didn't need to hear her words to know what they were. Apologies disguised as reflections. Regret dressed up as growth. Maybe even a tear or two carefully timed for effect. She was never good at being vulnerable until it cost her something. And even then, it always came with a condition. But I was done making space for conditions. That voicemail wasn't for me. It was for her. A last-ditch performance to feel like she still had a say in how the story ended. But she didn't. Because I already had. 2 hours later, I sat on the edge of the bed, folding laundry, something I used to do while she scrolled beside me, offering absent-minded commentary about her day, her friends, whatever drama she'd picked up from her phone. Now, the silence was peaceful. Not loaded. Not sharp. Just quiet. That night, I finally packed up the last of her things. Not with bitterness. Just efficiency. The drawers were lighter now. The closet no longer smelled like her perfume. Even the bathroom felt bigger. I boxed it all up, every trace, and left it in the garage. She could pick it up if she wanted. Or not. It didn't matter. Because none of it had power anymore. She used to fill every room, even when she wasn't there. Her presence was like background noise I'd learned to tune out, but never quite escape. Now it was gone. And in that absence, I could finally hear myself think again. Later, as I got into bed, I noticed the voicemail icon was still there. Just one. Unread. Untouched. I didn't delete it. But I didn't listen either. Because there's something powerful about letting words sit in silence. Never given the chance to rewrite the past or soften the edges. Let her wonder what I heard. Let her imagine the impact that never came. Because the cruelest goodbye isn't screamed. It's quiet, simple, complete. And sometimes, it sounds a lot like never hitting play. Saturday morning, I opened the old storage drive from the hall drawer. Not out of sentiment, just closure. It was full of digital leftovers. Trips we took, parties we threw, photos she'd insisted on posing for, perfecting every angle for the sake of perception. I clicked through slowly, not to feel anything, but to confirm I didn't. There was one from our anniversary trip to Big Sur. She was wearing that red scarf, leaning against the railing of a cliffside overlook. The sunset behind her looked photoshopped. Back then, I thought I'd captured love in that frame. Now I saw what I'd missed, the distance in her eyes even then. The way her body leaned away, not toward. The forced smile that only lasted long enough for the shudder. That trip had ended in silence. I remembered sleeping with my back to her while she scrolled through her phone, giggling at messages I never saw. I closed the laptop. Enough. 2 hours later, I went for a run through the old neighborhood trail. Cool breeze, headphones in, no destination. Just motion, just release. At the halfway mark, I checked my phone. She'd sent another message. A photo. One of us. One I hadn't seen in years. She'd found it, somehow. Probably digging through her own archives, trying to rewrite the story. Underneath, she wrote, "We were good once." I stared at that line for a long time. She wasn't wrong. We were good, once. But good doesn't survive neglect. It doesn't grow in shadows. It doesn't last when one person stops watering the roots. And now? Now she was using nostalgia like a fishing hook. But I wasn't biting. I didn't reply. Didn't delete it, either. I just archived it. Tucked it into the same quiet corner where I'd placed every other version of her that no longer belonged to my present. Because the thing about memories? They lose their weight when they stop being real. Later that evening, I cleaned the house from top to bottom. Not because I had to, but because it finally felt like mine again. I rearranged the living room. Moved the bed to a new wall. Bought new sheets. New towels. New scents. I wasn't living in a shared space anymore. I was living in a space she had no keys to. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees, I lit a candle and sank into the couch. No distractions. No ghosts. Just air. Clean. Still. And I realized, she had sent that photo hoping I'd remember what we were. But all I could see was everything we'd never be again. It was just after lunch on a Tuesday. I had just finished a call with a vendor when my assistant buzzed me. Said someone was at the front desk asking for me. No appointment. Her voice sounded unsure. So was I? Until she said the name. Aaron. I didn't speak. Didn't ask why. I just said I was busy. And I was. Busy living the life she abandoned. Still, I stood up from my chair, walked over to the glass wall, and looked down at the lobby from the mezzanine. She was sitting on the couch near reception, legs crossed, phone in hand, trying to look composed. Controlled. But her knee was bouncing. That gave her away. She didn't see me watching. Didn't know how easy it was now to see through the act. I could have gone down. Could have let her say her piece. Could have given her the scene she came for. Closure, maybe. Rehearsed apologies and declarations dressed as clarity. But the truth was, that chapter was already closed. And she wasn't part of the next one. So I turned around. Walked back to my desk. Didn't ask for updates. Didn't look again. A few minutes later, my assistant buzzed once more. She said to tell you it's important. I told her to let Aaron know I was in a meeting. And that I'd be in meetings for the rest of the day. She left 5 minutes later. No drama. No grand exit. Just a quiet shuffle out of a place that no longer had her name on any list. And that was the real shift. She used to be part of everything. My calendar, my weekends, my after-work routine. The reason I checked my phone. The reason I kept my evenings open. Now, she couldn't even get past the lobby. Later that evening, I stayed late by choice. Finished reports. Cleared my inbox. Took my time. And when I finally stepped out into the cool night air, I didn't check for messages. Didn't scroll for missed calls. I drove home with the windows cracked open and music playing, something I hadn't done in months. The house was dark when I pulled in. Quiet. Still. Perfect. I poured a drink. Sat by the window. Thought about that lobby. About her sitting there, waiting for a version of me that no longer existed. And I realized something. She hadn't come for forgiveness. She came for recognition. And I wasn't giving it. Because when someone makes themselves a stranger, the only thing left to do is treat them like one. It was Friday evening when her final message came. Not a paragraph, not a flood of texts, just one line. I'm ready to come home. That word, home, used to mean something. A shared space, a mutual rhythm, the life we built, piece by piece, over a decade. But the house she left behind? It wasn't hers anymore. Not in name, not in memory, not in meaning. I stared at the screen for a while, watching that sentence glow in the dark. Not because it tempted me, but because of what it revealed. She still didn't get it. To her, this was a pause, a break, a detour before returning to what once was. But the man she left behind hadn't stood still. He hadn't waited. He'd evolved. She wasn't coming back to the same place, because the place had changed. The locks, the furniture, the silence, even the air inside those walls. It had all shifted, and more importantly, so had I. I didn't reply, didn't send some poetic closure, didn't offer a soft landing. I let the message sit there like dust on glass, visible, but untouched. She wasn't looking for a conversation. She was looking for comfort, familiarity. But comfort doesn't survive betrayal. And familiarity fades when someone rewrites their life without you. That night, I went out with friends. Real friends. People who had seen me at my lowest and never asked, "When are you taking her back?" We grabbed drinks at a rooftop bar downtown. Laughed. Watched the city breathe beneath us. No one asked about Erin. No one had to, because she was no longer part of the orbit. Later, back home, I stood in the doorway of what used to be our bedroom. The bed was new. The sheets, new. Even the wall color was different now. There was nothing left that remembered her. And that was intentional. Because moving on isn't about anger. It's about subtraction. Erasing the version of yourself that stayed too long. That accepted too little. That waited for someone who was never coming back. Until they had nowhere else to go. She thought I'd be there. Still holding the frame she abandoned. Still guarding the door she slammed on her way out. But I wasn't. Because the cruelest part of walking away is realizing the place you're trying to return to doesn't exist anymore. It was quiet that morning. Not peaceful. Final. I'd woken early, brewed a single cup of coffee, and stood by the window watching the street. Not waiting for anything, just observing. The way the sun peeled over rooftops, the way light hit the pavement. I hadn't thought about her in days. Not actively. Not painfully. Then, at 9:12 a.m., a car pulled into the driveway. Same old model. Same dent on the rear fender. Same driver's side mirror she always meant to fix. She stepped out slow, like she wasn't sure her feet belonged on this street anymore. She wore the same beige coat she used to throw over anything to feel composed. Her hair was up. Her eyes were down. She looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. For a long moment, she just stood there, clutching something in her hand. A note maybe. Maybe nothing. Then she approached the door. One step at a time. Careful. Measured. And then she knocked. Soft. Twice. Like a question with no confidence in the answer. Inside, I stood in the hallway. Far enough that she couldn't hear me. Close enough to hear everything. No movement. No breath. Just stillness. She waited. Knocked again. Called my name once. No response. The door wasn't locked. But it might as well have been a wall. Because I wasn't opening it. Not now. Not for this. A minute passed. Then two. Then I heard her whisper something through the crack. Maybe sorry. Maybe nothing. And then, footsteps retreating. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't need to. Because the man who once watched her walk away with tears in his throat, he was gone. What stood in his place now was silence. And that silence didn't plead. Didn't chase. Didn't crumble. That silence had roots. Foundation. Distance. I walked back to the kitchen, rinsed out the cup, and opened the window. Let the morning in. Let the air touch a room that had finally healed. The past doesn't knock forever. Eventually, even it gets tired of waiting. And when she finally reached for the doorknob, she found what she never expected. Not a lock. Not a message. Just absence. No note. No final word. Because the only thing louder than revenge is indifference. And mine was permanent. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.